The stars looked cold and distant through the viewing window of the flagship. Commander Kael'vas stood with his hands behind his back, watching the empty space around them. 3 weeks had passed since the quantum storm hit their fleet. 3 weeks of growing fear and failing systems. Behind him, the bridge buzzed with quiet activity. His crew worked at their stations, trying to look busy. But Kael'vas knew the truth. They were all just waiting to die. The Velthari fleet had been magnificent once. 12 ships of crystal and light, each one a work of art that could cross the galaxy in days. The Velthari Empire was proud of these vessels. They were the finest ships ever built, carrying the most advanced civilization in known space. Now they sat broken in an empty system far from home. "Commander," called Engineer Nixandra from her station. Her voice was calm, but Kael'vas heard the worry underneath. "I have the damage report you requested." Kael'vas turned away from the window. Nixandra was young for her position, but she was the best engineer in the fleet. Her blue skin had turned pale over the past few weeks. The stress was showing on everyone. "Tell me," Kael'vas said simply. Nixandra looked at her display screen. The numbers there told a story of slow death. "All 12 ships have major hyperdrive damage. The quantum storm burned out our main crystals and melted the containment fields. Without those parts, we cannot jump to hyperspace. How long to repair them?" "That is the problem, Commander. We need rare quantum crystals and special tools. We do not have either on the ships. These materials only exist in our home systems or major space stations." Kael'vas nodded slowly. He had expected this answer, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the stomach. "What about our other systems?" Nixandra's report got worse. "Life support is failing slowly. Food makers are breaking down. Water recyclers work at only 60%. Medical systems are overwhelmed with radiation sickness from the storm. How long do we have?" "Maybe 4 months before life support fails completely. Less if we cannot fix the food and water systems." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Velthari had explored space for thousands of years. They had built an empire spanning hundreds of worlds, but they had always been self-reliant. They fixed their own problems with their own technology. Now they faced something their proud civilization had never prepared for. They needed help from others. Science officer Zix Mira spoke up from her station. "Commander, we could send a distress signal." The words hung in the air like a shameful secret. Kael'vas saw his crew shift uncomfortably. The Velthari were the first children of the galaxy. They had technology beyond what most species could imagine. They were teachers and leaders, not beggars asking for help. "A distress signal," Kael'vas repeated slowly. "Yes, sir. Standard emergency broadcast. It would tell anyone listening that we need help. And who would answer such a call in this empty region?" Zixmira checked her star charts. "We are in the outer rim. Few ships travel here. But there are some mining operations, maybe trading vessels. Pirates and scavengers, more likely," muttered. Navigation Officer Velkarn Kael'vas walked slowly around the bridge. His crew watched him with hope and fear in their eyes. They were good people. Scientists, engineers, explorers. Many had families on the civilian ships. Children who played in the crystal gardens. Artists who created beautiful works. Scholars who spent their lives learning. All of them would die if he made the wrong choice. "Commander," called Medical Officer Thynera over the communication system. "We have more sick people coming to the medical bay. The radiation from the storm is affecting more crew members each day." Kael'vas pressed the reply button. "How many?" 47 new cases today. That makes over 300 total. I am running out of medicine. More bad news." Kael'vas looked out the window again. In the distance, he could see the other ships of his fleet, beautiful vessels that looked like floating gems against the stars. Each one carried thousands of his people. He thought about the civilian ship, Harmony of Stars. It held 8,000 people, including 500 children. There was also the research vessel Deep Thought, full of the Empire's best scientists. The cultural ship Memory of Home carried artists and musicians and writers. All of them trusted him to get them home safely. "Sir?" Nixandra said quietly. "What are your orders?" Kael'vas closed his eyes. His people had a saying, "The tree that will not bend will break in the storm." Maybe it was time for the proud Velthari to learn how to bend. "Send the distress signal," he said. The bridge crew looked surprised. Some seemed relieved. Others looked worried. "What message should we include?" asked Zixmira. Kael'vas thought carefully. How do you ask for help when you have never needed it before? How do you explain that the greatest civilization in the galaxy was broken and helpless? "Keep it simple," he said. 12 Velthari ships with hyperdrive failure, 50,000 souls aboard, life support failing, position coordinates attached, we request assistance. The words felt strange in his mouth. Request assistance. He had never said those words before in his long career. Zixmira programmed the message into the communication system. "Signal ready, Commander. Send it on all frequencies, repeat every hour." "Yes, sir." The message went out into space, traveling at light speed toward anyone who might be listening. Kael'vas wondered who would hear it first. Pirates looking for easy targets? Traders who might try to bargain for their technology? Or maybe no one at all. He walked back to his command chair and sat down heavily. Around him, his crew tried to look busy, but he knew they were all thinking the same thing. They had crossed a line today. The proud Velthari had admitted they could not solve their own problems. Hours passed. The distress signal repeated again and again, but space remained silent. No ships appeared on their sensors. No responses came to their call for help. On the civilian ships, people began to ask questions. Why had they stopped moving? Why were the lights dimmer? Why was the food different? Kael'vas knew he would have to address the fleet soon. He would have to tell 50,000 people that they might die in this empty place far from home. "Commander," called Communications Officer Rexion, "we are getting reports from the other ships. More system failures. The civilian ship Garden of Peace has lost 2 food makers. The transport heavy lifter has problems with its air recyclers." Each report was another nail in their coffin. Kael'vas nodded but said nothing. What could he say? They had done everything possible. Now they could only wait and hope. Night came to the ship, though in space there was no real difference between day and night. The bridge crew changed shifts. New faces appeared at the stations, but the worry in their eyes was the same. Kael'vas remained in his chair, staring at the main screen. It showed their sensor readings of the surrounding space. Empty, cold, no signs of life or civilization anywhere. He thought about his homeworld, Velthar Prime, beautiful cities of crystal and light, gardens that bloomed with flowers from 100 worlds, libraries that held the knowledge of ages. His family lived there, his mate and their 2 children. Would he ever see them again? "Signal repeating," announced the night communications officer. No responses detected. Kael'vas nodded. The message continued to broadcast into the darkness, a desperate cry for help from the proudest people in the galaxy. Somewhere out there, someone might hear it. Someone might care enough to help. Or maybe they would all die here, and the Velthari Empire would wonder what happened to their lost fleet. Maybe other ships would find their bodies years later, floating in the cold space between stars. But for now, all they could do was wait. 3 days passed before the sensors picked up something new. Science Officer Zixmira was the first to notice the readings during her morning shift. "Commander," she called out, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and confusion. "I am detecting multiple ships approaching our position." Kael'vas had been reviewing more damage reports when the announcement came. He quickly moved to Zixmira's station and looked at her screen. 5 dots were moving toward them at a steady pace. "How far away?" he asked. "About 2 hours at their current speed. They are not very fast. Can you tell what kind of ships they are?" Zixmira worked at her controls trying to get better readings. "This is strange, Commander. The ships are very primitive, metal hulls with crude designs. Their energy readings are weak and unstable." Navigation Officer Velkarn joined them at the science station. "Could be pirates," he said darkly. "They might have heard our distress call and come to pick our bones clean. Or they might be here to help," Kael'vas replied, though he had his own doubts. The approaching ships did sound primitive. What could such vessels do for the advanced Velthari fleet? "Sir?" called Communications Officer Rexion. "I am receiving a transmission from the lead ship." "Put it on the main speakers." The bridge filled with static. Then a voice came through. It spoke in broken Galactic Standard, the common language used for trade between species. The accent was unfamiliar. "Velthari ships, this is Captain Do Hyun of the Earth vessel Seoul. We heard your distress call. We are coming to help you. Please respond." Earth vessel? Kael Voss had never heard of a species called humans, or a world called Earth. He gestured for Rexion to open a channel. "This is Commander Kael Voss of the Velthari fleet. We appreciate your response to our call. What kind of assistance can you provide?" The reply came quickly. "We have repair equipment, medical supplies, and food. Our engineers can look at your problems. We will be there soon." Zix Mira pulled up what information she could find about these humans in their database. "Commander, I found a few old reports. Humans are a young species from a planet called Earth. They only started traveling between stars recently. Very primitive technology." "How primitive?" "They still use metal ships and chemical rockets. No energy shields or quantum drives. They have barely left their home system." Kael Voss frowned. How could such a primitive species help the mighty Velthari? Their broken quantum drives were beyond the understanding of most advanced civilizations. What could creatures who still used metal ships possibly do? But as the hours passed and their situation grew worse, Kael Voss found himself watching the approaching ships with growing hope. Help was help, even if it came from an unexpected source. The human ships finally came into visual range. Zix Mira put them on the main screen, and the bridge crew stared in shock. The vessels were ugly by Velthari standards. Rough metal hulls with visible welding seams. Weapons and equipment bolted to the outside. Energy readings that jumped around, like sick animals. They looked like they had been built in a scrapyard. "These are the ships that will save us?" muttered Velkarn. "They are what we have," Kael Voss replied firmly. The lead human ship, Seoul, moved closer to the Velthari flagship. As it approached, Kael Voss could see more details. The hull was covered in dents and scratches. Different sections were painted in different colors, as if they had been added at different times. It looked more like a flying junk pile than a proper spacecraft. "Velthari flagship," came Captain Do Hyun's voice again. "We request permission to send a team aboard to assess your situation." Kael Voss hesitated. Letting aliens onto a Velthari ship was almost unheard of. Their technology was far beyond what most species could understand. There were security concerns, cultural issues. But looking around his damaged bridge with its flickering lights and failing systems, he realized those concerns were luxuries he could not afford. "Permission granted," he said. "Docking Bay 3 is prepared for your shuttle." "Thank you. Our team will be there in 10 minutes. While they waited, Kael Voss gathered his senior officers in the docking bay. He wanted to meet these humans face to face and see what kind of help they could actually provide. The human shuttle arrived exactly on time. It was as crude as their ships. A metal box with engines strapped to it. It landed with a heavy thud that shook the docking bay floor. The airlock opened, and the humans stepped out. Kael Voss was surprised by what he saw. The humans were shorter than most Velthari, with thick bodies and strange flat faces. Their skin was a brown color, and they had black hair on their heads. They wore simple work clothes instead of fancy uniforms. The leader stepped forward and bowed politely. "Commander Kael Voss, I am Lieutenant Commander Bo-Ra. Captain Do Hyun sends his greetings and his promise that we will do everything we can to help you." Her Galactic Standard was better than her captain's, though still accented. She seemed confident and friendly, not intimidated by the advanced Velthari technology around her. "Welcome aboard," Kael Voss replied formally. "Though I must warn you, our problems are quite complex. Our quantum drive systems are beyond what most species can repair." Bo-Ra smiled. "We will see. May I introduce my team? This is Engineering Chief Minho, Medical Officer Ji-Woo, and Systems Analyst Tae-Woo." Each human nodded as their name was called. They all had that same confident, friendly manner. They looked around the docking bay with obvious interest, but not the awe that most primitive species showed when seeing Velthari technology. "Your ship is beautiful," Jiwoo said, speaking to Nixandra. "The crystal work is amazing. I have never seen anything like it." Nixandra seemed pleased by the compliment. "Thank you. Velthari shipbuilding is considered an art form." "Can we see the damaged areas?" asked Minho. He was a stocky man with calloused hands that showed he was used to working with tools. "We brought diagnostic equipment." Kael'vas led the group through the ship toward the engine sections. As they walked, he watched the humans carefully. They examined everything with sharp eyes, asking questions about how different systems worked. But their questions were practical ones, focused on function rather than theory. When they reached the quantum drive chamber, Minho whistled softly. The room was filled with elegant crystalline structures that channeled exotic energies, or had, before the storm burned them out. Now many of the crystals were cracked or melted and the containment fields were dark. "This is incredible," Minho said, walking around the damaged equipment. "I do not understand how it works, but I can see what is broken." He pulled out a crude-looking device and began scanning the damaged crystals. "These power conduits are burned out. The containment matrix is cracked, and these focusing elements are completely melted." Nixandra looked surprised. "You can identify the damaged components?" "Damage is damage," Minho replied with a shrug. "The principle is the same whether you are fixing a quantum drive or a water pump. Something is broken, so you find it and fix it. But the theory behind quantum field manipulation is extremely complex," Nixandra protested. "It requires years of study to understand." Minho grinned. "I do not need to understand why it works. I just need to know how to make it work again." While Minho examined the engines, Jiwoo was asking about their medical situation. "How many sick people do you have?" she asked Medical Officer Thynera. "Over 300 with radiation poisoning. More getting sick each day. What treatments are you using?" Thynera listed the sophisticated Velthari medical procedures. Jiwoo nodded along, though Kael'vas suspected she understood maybe half of what she was hearing. "Can I see your medical bay?" Jiwoo asked. They made their way to the medical section, where dozens of sick Velthari lay on treatment beds. The air hummed with the sound of advanced medical machines. Jiwoo walked among the patients, examining them with a simple handheld device. "This is radiation sickness, yes," she said to Thynera. "We have treatments for this." "You do?" Thynera seemed skeptical. "But humans are so primitive. I mean, your medical technology is simple, yes," Jiwoo agreed cheerfully. "But sometimes simple works better than complex." She opened her medical kit and showed Thynera various items. "These pills reduce radiation damage. This injection helps the body heal faster. This cream stops skin damage." "But these are such basic treatments," Thynera protested. "Basic but effective. Your machines are beautiful, but they need power to work. My treatments work even when the power fails." Back in the engine room, Minho was explaining his repair plan to an amazed Nixandra. "We cannot replace your quantum crystals, but we can bypass the damaged sections. We use these metal conduits to reroute the power flow. Then we strengthen the containment fields with these support brackets." "But that will ruin the elegant design," Nixandra said, looking horrified. "Yes, it will be ugly," Minho agreed. "But ugly and working is better than beautiful and broken." As the day wore on, more human teams arrived on the other Velthari ships. They brought supplies, equipment, and most importantly, a different way of thinking about problems. Where the Velthari saw complex, delicate systems that required perfect understanding, the humans saw practical challenges that needed practical solutions. They did not care if their fixes were ugly or crude as long as they worked. "Why are you helping us?" Kael'vas asked Bora as they watched the human team's work. Bora seemed surprised by the question. Captain Do-hyun arrived on the Velthari flagship the next morning with more human ships following behind him. Kael'vas watched from the bridge as vessel after vessel appeared on their sensors. Ugly metal ships, all different sizes and designs, but all heading toward the stranded fleet. "How many ships do you have?" Kael'vas asked when Do-hyun joined him on the bridge. 18 in total," Do-hyun replied in his careful galactic standard. We sent messages to other human groups in this region. Mining companies, traders, research teams. Everyone came to help. Everyone? Yes. When humans hear that someone needs help, we come. Kael'vas found this hard to believe. In his experience, most species helped only when they could gain something from it. But as he watched the human ships position themselves around his fleet, he began to see that Do-hyun was telling the truth. The humans worked with an energy that amazed the Velthari. They did not form committees or hold meetings to discuss what to do. They simply saw problems and started fixing them. On the civilian ship Garden of Peace, engineer Soo-jin was working with chief botanist Lear Vendis to repair the food production systems. The elegant biochambers that grew Velthari food had stopped working when their control crystals failed. These plants need specific light wavelengths and mineral mixtures, Lear Vendis explained as they walked through the damaged growing chambers. Very precise requirements. Soo-jin nodded, examining the dead plants with her simple scanner. What did they eat before you put them in these machines? Before? I do not understand. These are still living plants, yes? What do plants need to grow? Light, water, soil, air, the basic things. But the precise wavelengths, the exact mineral balance. Let us try basic things first, Soo-jin suggested. She opened her equipment cases and pulled out simple growing lights and bags of soil. Human food plants are not so different. Maybe yours will grow with simple care, too. Meanwhile, on the medical ship Healing Touch, Dr. Jiwoo was working miracles with her basic treatments. The sophisticated Velthari medical machines required enormous amounts of power and rare medicines. But Jiwoo's simple drugs and procedures worked without electricity. This injection will help your body fight the radiation damage, she explained to a sick engineer while Thynira watched. It is not as fancy as your nano-healers, but it works. How do you know so much about treating radiation sickness? Thynira asked. Humans have had nuclear weapons for a long time, Jiwoo replied sadly. We learned to treat radiation poisoning because we had to. The most impressive work was happening in the engine rooms. Minho had brought more human engineers and they were performing what looked like magic to the Velthari. We cannot replace your quantum crystals, Minho explained to a group of amazed Velthari engineers. But we can work around them. He showed them his plan using simple drawings on a tablet. See? We bypass the damaged sections with these metal tubes. We add extra support here and here. We use these power regulators to control the energy flow. But the quantum fields will be completely unbalanced, protested Assistant Engineer Kalmoth. The harmonic resonance will be destroyed. Yes, probably, Minho agreed. But it will work well enough to get you home, then you can rebuild it properly. You want to turn our beautiful quantum drives into crude metal pipes? If crude metal pipes will save your lives, then yes. The work continued around the clock. Human teams moved between the Velthari ships bringing supplies and equipment. They worked alongside Velthari crews, teaching them how to make simple repairs with basic tools. Communication specialist Yoonji set up a network between all the ships using human radio equipment. It was primitive compared to Velthari quantum communications, but it worked when their advanced systems failed. Sometimes simple is better, she explained to communications officer Rexion. These radios are hard to break. Your quantum communicators are beautiful, but one damaged crystal and they stop working. Chef Wu Jin caused excitement throughout the fleet when he started adapting human food for Velthari dietary needs. The elegant food synthesizers had been failing, producing tasteless nutrition paste. But Wu Jin cooked real meals using basic ingredients. This is actual food, marveled Chief Nutritionist Valandra as she tasted Wu Jin's soup. I had forgotten what real food tastes like. Food should have taste and texture, Wu Jin said happily. Machines can make nutrition, but only people can make meals. The biggest surprise came when Maintenance Chief Tae-woo started organizing Velthari children to help with simple repairs. The adults had been horrified at first. Children should not touch important ship systems. But Tae-woo showed them that small hands could reach places adults could not go. Children are natural engineers, he explained to worried parents. They see solutions that adults miss because they do not know what is supposed to be impossible. Soon, Velthari children were running cables through tight spaces and adjusting connections in hard-to-reach areas. They loved helping, and their enthusiasm spread to the adults. But not everyone was happy with the human assistance. On the cultural ship Memory of Home, High Priest Keth Maris watched the human activity with growing alarm. The humans were destroying everything that made Velthari technology special. They turned elegant systems into crude mechanical devices. They replaced artistic designs with ugly but functional solutions. "This is wrong," he told anyone who would listen. "We are betraying everything our people stand for. These humans are barbarians who care nothing for beauty or perfection." Some Velthari agreed with him. They had spent their lives creating and maintaining the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Watching humans hammer metal supports onto quantum field generators felt like watching vandals destroy artwork. "Look what they have done to our hyperdrive," complained senior technician, Moore Gavith. "Pipes and wires everywhere. It looks like scrap metal." "It looks like something that will work," replied Nixandra firmly. She had been working closely with Minho and was amazed by his practical approach to engineering. "Our beautiful design was useless when it broke. His ugly design might save our lives." The argument split the Velthari. The older, more traditional ones wanted to maintain their technological purity, even if it meant death. The younger ones were more willing to accept human help, even if it meant abandoning their aesthetic principles. Kael'vas found himself caught between the two groups. As commander, he had to think about saving lives. But as a Velthari, he understood the pride his people felt in their advanced civilization. The crisis came to a head during a meeting of the senior officers. "Commander," said High Priest Keth Maris, "I must protest these repairs. The humans are desecrating our ships. They are turning works of art into mechanical monstrosities." "They are saving our lives," replied Chief Engineer Nixandra. "Without their help, we will all die in a few months. Better to die with honor than live with shame." "Easy to say when you are not the one responsible for 50,000 lives," Kael'vas said sharply. "I will not let people die to preserve our pride." "But what will we be if we abandon everything that makes us Velthari?" Keth Maris asked. "These humans understand nothing of beauty or elegance. They see only crude function." Captain Do-hyun, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "High Priest, may I ask you something?" "What?" "Why do you build beautiful ships?" Keth Maris seemed surprised by the question. "Because beauty elevates the spirit. Because creating beautiful things honors our culture and our gods." "And why do you travel in space? To explore? To learn? To spread Velthari wisdom throughout the galaxy. So your beautiful ships exist to serve your people and your goals." "Of course. Then making them ugly to save lives is still serving their purpose," Do-hyun said simply. "A ship that cannot fly serves no one, no matter how beautiful it is." The meeting fell silent. Keth Maris stared at the human captain, clearly struggling with this idea. "But the principles," he started. "Will survive if your people survive," Do-hyun finished. "You can rebuild beautiful ships later. You cannot bring back dead people." That night, as Kael'vas walked through his ship, he saw the changes the humans had made. Metal pipes ran along crystal walls. Crude electronic boxes sat next to elegant control panels. Wire bundles snaked through areas that had once been smooth and clean. It was ugly. There was no denying that. But the lights were brighter than they had been in weeks. The air smelled fresher. The humming of the life support systems was stronger and steadier. In the medical bay, he found Velthari patients sitting up and talking for the first time since the storm. Jiwoo's simple medicines were working better than their complex treatments. In the growing chambers, he saw green shoots pushing up through Su-jin's basic soil. Real plants growing under simple lights, producing food that people actually wanted to eat. And in the engine room, he watched Minho and Nixandra working together to install another ugly but functional repair. They were teaching each other, sharing knowledge across the vast gap between their technologies. "Commander," called Nixandra when she saw him, "we think we can restore partial hyperdrive function to 3 ships by tomorrow." Partial function? Enough. To make short jumps, Minho explained. Not beautiful, but working. Kael'vas nodded. Working was what they needed right now. As he returned to his quarters, he thought about what Do-hyun had said. The crisis that would change everything started with a simple alarm bell. Kael'vas was sleeping when the emergency signal woke him. He rushed to the bridge to find his night crew working frantically at their stations. Report, he ordered. It's the civilian ship Harmony of Stars, said Night Watch Officer Kexvalor. They have a reactor overload building in their power core. If it explodes, 8,000 people will die. Kael'vas felt his blood turn cold. Harmony of Stars was one of their largest civilian vessels, packed with families and children. How long do we have? Maybe 6 hours before the reactor reaches critical failure. Maybe less. What caused it? The human repairs to their power systems created an imbalance. The emergency power routings cannot handle the load. Kael'vas closed his eyes. This was exactly what High Priest Kethmaris had warned about. The human modifications were crude and dangerous. Now their meddling might kill thousands of innocent people. Sir, called Communications Officer Lexandra, Captain Do-hyun is requesting permission to bring his engineering teams aboard Harmony of Stars. Tell him yes and get me Minho and Nixandra immediately. Within minutes, both engineers were on the bridge. Minho looked tired. He had been working almost non-stop for days, but when he heard about the reactor crisis, his face became very serious. Show me the power readings, he said to Nixandra. She displayed the data on the main screen. The reactor temperature was climbing steadily. Power fluctuations were getting worse. Several safety systems had already failed. This is bad, Minho admitted. The reactor is going to melt down. Can you fix it? Kael'vas asked. Maybe. But someone will have to go into the reactor chamber to make manual adjustments. The radiation levels are very high. How high? Nixandra checked the readings. Fatal for any organic being within minutes. Even our best radiation suits will not protect someone for long enough. What about remote drones? The electromagnetic interference from the failing reactor will disrupt any electronic controls. It has to be done manually. Kael'vas stared at the screen showing the doomed ship. 8,000 people, including hundreds of children. They would all die because the human repairs had failed. I will go, said Nixandra quietly. No, Minho said immediately. It was my repair work that caused this. If anyone goes, it should be me. You do not understand Velthari reactor systems well enough, Nixandra replied. I know exactly what adjustments to make. Then I will go with you. 2 people can work faster than 1. You will both die, Kael'vas said flatly. Maybe, Minho agreed. But 8,000 other people will live. Before Kael'vas could respond, his communication panel lit up with incoming messages. Human volunteers from every ship in their fleet were requesting permission to join the repair mission. Captain Do-hyun arrived with a dozen human engineers. Commander, my people are ready to help. This is not your responsibility, Kael'vas told him. The reactor failure was caused by our incompatible systems, not human error. Does not matter, Do-hyun replied simply. People need help. We help. You will die. The radiation will kill anyone who enters that reactor chamber. Maybe. Maybe. Not. But we have to try. More messages came in. Engineer Soo-jin volunteered. Maintenance Chief Tae-woo volunteered. Even Medical Officer Ji-woo offered to go, saying someone might need medical help afterward. Kael'vas looked around the bridge. His own crew was volunteering too. Young officers who had families at home. Experienced engineers who had years of life ahead of them, all willing to die to save people they barely knew. Sir, said Communications Officer Lexandra, High Priest Kethmaris is requesting to speak with you privately. Put him through to my ready room. In his small private office, Kael'vas faced the image of Kethmaris on his screen. The High Priest looked older than usual, his face lined with worry. Commander, I have been watching the human activities throughout our fleet. I have seen what they are willing to do to save our people. And? I was wrong to oppose them. These humans may use crude methods, but they understand something we have forgotten. What is that? That the purpose of all our technology, all our beauty, all our advancement, is to preserve and protect life. When we lost sight of that purpose, we became proud, but useless. Kethmaris paused, looking directly at Kael'vas through the screen. I am giving my permission to use the sacred crystals from our religious artifacts. If stripping our temples bare will help save the people on Harmony of Stars, then do it. Kael'vas was shocked. The sacred crystals were the most holy objects in Velthari culture. They were never touched except by the highest priests during the most important ceremonies. High Priest, are you certain? Once we remove those crystals, they become tools to preserve life instead of pretty decorations for the dead. I think our ancestors would approve. The call ended, and Kael'vas sat alone for a moment. Then he activated his fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Commander Kael'vas. We are facing a crisis that threatens 8,000 lives. Our most sacred artifacts contain crystals that might help stabilize the failing reactor. I am authorizing their removal and use. The response was immediate. Teams of Velthari priests and engineers began carefully extracting the sacred crystals from temples and shrines throughout the fleet. Objects that had been revered for centuries became emergency repair supplies. On Harmony of Stars, the situation was getting worse. The reactor temperature continued to climb. Evacuation ships could only carry a few hundred people at a time. There was no way to get everyone off the ship before the reactor exploded. Minho and Nixandra worked together to plan their approach to the reactor chamber. They would have to crawl through maintenance tunnels, disable several safety systems, manually, and then recalibrate the power flow controls while being cooked by radiation. Even if we succeed, we will probably die from radiation poisoning, Nixandra warned. Probably, Minho agreed. But those 8,000 people will live. Captain Do-hyun stood nearby with 12 other human volunteers. We go together. More. People can work faster. No, Kael'vas said firmly. I will not watch 14 brave people die because of Velthari pride. This is not about pride, Do-hyun replied. This is about doing what is right. One of the human volunteers, Engineer Jin-woo, stepped forward. Commander, with respect, this is our choice to make. We came here to help your people. If helping means dying, then we die. But why? Kael'vas asked, genuinely confused. You barely know us. We are not your people. Our cultures are completely different. Jin-woo looked around at his fellow humans, then back at Kael'vas. Because they are people. Because they are in danger. Because we can help. What other reason do we need? The simple honesty of the answer hit Kael'vas like a physical blow. These humans really did not understand why anyone would question their willingness to help. To them, it was as natural as breathing. Very well, he said quietly. But you follow Nixandra's lead. She knows our systems better than anyone. The volunteer team suited up in the best radiation protection available. It would not be enough, but it might buy them a few extra minutes. They gathered at the entrance to the maintenance tunnels that led to the reactor chamber. Remember, Nixandra told them, we have maybe 20 minutes before the radiation doses become fatal. The priority is stabilizing the main power flow. If we can do that, the automatic systems can handle the rest. And if we cannot, asked Minho, then we try anyway until we die. The team entered the maintenance tunnels and began crawling toward the heart of the failing reactor. Behind them, 50,000 people held their breath and waited to see if 14 volunteers could perform a miracle. On the bridge of the flagship, Kael'vas watched the reactor readings and thought about what he had learned. The humans had taught his people something important. Technology existed to serve life, not the other way around. Beauty was worthless if it came at the cost of survival. And sometimes the greatest honor came not from maintaining perfection, but from accepting imperfection in order to help others. The radiation alarms were screaming now as the volunteer team reached the reactor chamber. Through the communication system, Kael'vas could hear them working frantically to save 8,000 lives. All he could do was wait and hope that their sacrifice would not be in vain. The radio crackled with static as the volunteer team worked inside the reactor chamber. Kael'vas stood on the bridge, listening to their voices grow weaker as radiation poisoning began to affect them. Power flow stabilized on Section 1, reported Nixandra, though her voice was already strained. Section 2 responding, added Minho. But the containment field is still fluctuating. I can reach the manual controls, called Engineer Jinwoo. Adjusting now. For 18 agonizing minutes, the team worked to stabilize the failing reactor. One by one, the critical systems came back under control. The temperature readings began to drop. The power fluctuations smoothed out. That's it, Nixandra finally announced. Reactor is stable, everyone out now. The 14 volunteers crawled back through the maintenance tunnels as fast as their weakened bodies could manage. When they emerged, Medical Officer Ji-woo was waiting with human medical equipment and Velthari doctors. All 14 had received massive radiation doses. But they were alive, and so were the 8,000 people on Harmony of Stars. As the volunteers were rushed to medical treatment, Kale Voss made another fleet-wide announcement. The crisis is over. Harmony of Stars is safe. Thanks to the courage of 14 people who risked everything to save strangers. The celebration throughout the fleet was unlike anything Kale Voss had ever experienced. Humans and Velthari worked together, no longer separated by their different technologies or cultures. They had become something new, a community united by shared purpose. Over the following weeks, the repairs continued with new energy. The sacred crystals from the religious artifacts provided the power regulation needed to make the hybrid human Velthari systems work properly. More ships came online with partial hyperdrive capability. High Priest Kethmaris personally oversaw the dismantling of the most sacred shrine on the cultural ship. As each crystal was carefully removed and handed to engineers, he spoke a blessing over it. Go now and serve life instead of ceremony, he said. This is a higher purpose than decoration. The transformation of Velthari culture was remarkable to watch. Young people began learning human repair techniques alongside their traditional studies. Children played games that mixed Velthari elegance with human practicality. Chef Wu Jin started teaching Velthari cooks how to prepare real food instead of relying on synthesizers. Soon every ship had kitchens where people prepared meals together, sharing stories and laughter. Engineer Su Jin showed Velthari farmers how to grow food using simple methods when their complex biochambers failed. Plants that had been struggling in perfect artificial conditions thrived in basic soil and natural light. Most importantly, the two species learned to communicate better. Translator programs helped, but real understanding came from working side by side on common problems. Humans learned to appreciate Velthari artistry and deep knowledge. Velthari learned to value human adaptability and practical wisdom. 6 weeks after first contact, Commander Kale Voss stood in the main engine room of his flagship. The quantum drives were working again, though they looked nothing like their original elegant design. Metal pipes and human control systems were welded onto crystal matrices and energy fields. It was ugly by Velthari standards, but it was functional. We can make short hyperspace jumps now, reported Nixandra. She had recovered from her radiation exposure and was working more closely than ever with Minho. Not fast or far, but enough to reach a major space station for proper repairs. How many ships are ready for travel? 10 of 12. We are still working on deep thought and memory of home. Excellent work, both of you. Minho grinned. Your people are fast learners. Give us another month and we would have all your ships flying like new. Different from new, Nixandra corrected. But maybe better in some ways. Captain Do-hyun joined them in the engine room. Commander, our job here is almost finished. My ships will need to return to our mining operations soon. Kale Voss had been dreading this moment. After everything the humans had done, how could the Velthari possibly repay them? Captain, how can we thank you? Our people owe you their lives. Name whatever payment you want. Territory, technology, trade agreements. Do-hyun looked genuinely confused. Payment? Why would we want payment for helping people? Because help of this magnitude usually has a price. Not for us. We helped because you needed help. That is payment enough. Kale Voss stared at this remarkable human. But surely there is something we can give you. Our technology, our knowledge, our friendship. Friendship would be nice, Do-hyun admitted. And maybe we could trade star charts? Your maps of this region are much better than ours. Star charts? That is all? And maybe some of those beautiful crystal decorations, if you have extras. My wife would love to see Velthari artwork. The simplicity of the request was almost shocking. These humans had saved 50,000 lives and asked for nothing but maps and souvenirs in return. Of course, Akalvos said, and much more. We would be honored to establish formal relations between our peoples. That would be good. Humans are always happy to make new friends. Later that day, Kalvos met with his senior officers to discuss the future relationship with humanity. The conversation revealed how much his people had changed. I recommend we establish an exchange program, said Nixandra. Send some of our young engineers to learn human methods. Bring some human students here to study our theories. The medical applications could be revolutionary, added Dr. Thynira. Human treatments are simple but effective. Combined with our advanced diagnostics, we could help many more people. Their food preparation methods have already improved morale throughout the fleet, reported nutritionist Velandra. Real cooking, instead of synthesized nutrition. Even High Priest Kethmaris had suggestions. Their approach to problem-solving could teach us much about practical wisdom. Perhaps some of our religious scholars should study human philosophy. Science Officer Zixmira was the most excited. Commander, they have shown us an entirely new way of thinking about technology. Function over form, adaptation over perfection. This could revolutionize our entire civilization. Are we ready for such changes? Kalvos asked. Are we ready to go back to the old ways? Zixmira replied. Before the humans came, we were dying because our perfect technology could not adapt to unexpected problems. Now we know better. The next morning, the Velthari fleet began its journey home. The ships moved slowly, making careful hyperspace jumps with their jury-rigged drives. But they moved. As they traveled, word spread ahead of them about the humans who had helped without asking for anything in return. By the time they reached Velthari space, the entire empire was talking about these remarkable creatures. Kalvos updated his personal log one final time. We began this journey as the proudest people in the galaxy, convinced of our superiority over all other species. We return as wiser people who have learned that true advancement comes not from perfect technology, but from perfect compassion. The humans showed us that the most sophisticated civilization is not the one with the most complex machines, but the one that remembers why those machines exist. They exist to preserve life, to reduce suffering, to help people thrive. We have gained more than working engines on this journey. We have gained perspective. We have gained humility. And we have gained friends who will help us become better than we ever dreamed possible. Meanwhile, Captain Dohyun was updating his own log aboard the Soul. Finished helping some folks with their broken ships today. Nice people. Very formal at first, but they loosened up once they saw we were serious about helping. Learned some interesting things about quantum drives, though I still do not really understand how they work. The Velthari gave us some beautiful crystal art pieces and excellent star charts. Good trade. Maybe we will run into them again someday. Would be nice to see how they are doing. Back to mining operations tomorrow. The universe is full of people who need help, and there is always more work to do. The human ships continued on their original course as if nothing unusual had happened. They had saved an entire civilization, and barely considered it worth mentioning in their logs. But across the galaxy, the story spread. The tale of the humans who helped without expecting reward became legend among a dozen species. And slowly, the idea began to take hold that perhaps the best measure of a civilization was not what it could achieve for itself, but what it was willing to do for others. The Velthari fleet reached home safely, their ships ugly but functional, their people alive and forever changed. They had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from perfection, but from the willingness to be imperfect in service of something greater than yourself. And in the deep reaches of space, human ships continued their quiet work of mining, trading, and helping anyone who needed it, never realizing they had just changed the course of galactic history.